Jake, Emily always makes the top 5 in her class. You need to try harder. My mom's words, they hung there, heavy, like morning fog. I glanced at the alarm clock. 7:15. 45 minutes to get to school. I sighed, forced myself out of bed. My name's Jake, 17. I live in a quiet, leafy suburb in Alabama. I dream of being a doctor, a big dream. The reality? I hate studying. Getting out of bed feels like a chore. I looked out the window. David and Emily walking back from their morning stroll. Laughing, talking. They'd moved in next door a week ago. Emily's my age. David, an online tutor. Hey, Jake, Emily called out, waving at me. She was slender, with intelligent, calm eyes. Her clothes were simple, but classy. She looked like she had everything figured out. Hey, I stammered, a little surprised. Emily had transferred to my high school. Smart was an understatement. Apparently, she was always in the top 5 at her old school. She was also athletic, had a sunny personality, and was already turning heads at school. Popular. It wasn't fair. Want to walk to school together? She asked, smiling. Yeah, sure, I said, a little hesitant. I quickly ate breakfast, grabbed my bag, heading for the door. Jake, did you forget anything? My mom, Sarah, asked. Oh, and try your best today. Don't let Emily beat you. Here we go again. I sighed inwardly. I know, Mom. Outside, Emily was waiting. Sorry to keep you waiting, I said. No worries, she replied with a smile. Let's go. As we walked, she started talking. Hey, Jake, Alabama weather is literally like Allah, sunny ma, right? I laughed. Pretty good, but I guess it's Allah, rainy ma on rainy days. Emily laughed too. Yeah, and maybe Allah, cold ma in winter. The conversation flowed easily. The walk to school flew by. I felt relaxed for the first time that morning. As we walked into the classroom, everyone turned to look at Emily. Hey, Emily, that new outfit looks great on you. Can you tell me about the math test today? Emily responded to everyone with a natural, genuine smile. I sat down in a seat a little away from the rest and just watched her. It was like she was a magnet, and everyone was drawn to her light. Class started. The teacher posed a problem. Okay, solve this equation. Emily raised her hand immediately. I have it. She stood in front of the board, solved the complex equation effortlessly. Her classmates gasped in admiration. I stared at my own notebook. I knew how to solve it. I did. But my hand wouldn't move. Seeing Emily made me feel smaller and smaller, like a fading shadow. After school, it was time for clubs. Emily had joined the basketball team. I could hear the cheers from the gym. Wow, Emily, you're a natural, I heard the coach say. I sighed, gathered my things, and headed out. Back home, my mom was waiting. Jake, how was your day? She asked. It was fine, I replied. How was Emily? There it was again. Her name. Okay, Jake, you need to try harder. Learn from Emily. I wanted to cover my ears. I walked silently to my room. It was a ritual. Looking out the window, I saw Emily walking home. David was waiting for her. They walked into their house, laughing together. They were like the perfect family. I sat down at my desk, opened my textbook, but I couldn't focus. My mind was full of fog. I couldn't think straight. Why? I muttered. Every time I thought about Emily, a heavy feeling settled in my chest. Was it inferiority, jealousy, or something else? I buried my face in my pillow, sighed deeply. I had to go back to school tomorrow. I'd be surrounded by Emily's smile, my classmates' admiration, and my mother's expectations. It felt suffocating. What will tomorrow be like? I wondered, as I closed my eyes. I could hear laughter coming from Emily's house. It felt like they were always happy, always having a good time. Jake, give me your report card. 2 months. Almost 2 months had passed since Emily and David moved in next door. My mother's sharp voice cut through the quiet of dinner. I hesitated, pulled my report card from my bag. My hand was trembling, just a little. Here. My mom took it, squinting at it. I watched her face. Her expression, it clouded over, like a storm coming in. The smell of dinner on the table, it turned sour. Just like that. This is... My mom choked on the words. What is this, Jake? My dad, Mark, looked up from his magazine. The edge of the magazine was curled, bent. What's wrong, Sarah? My mom handed him the report card. Her hand, like it was holding burning paper. Look, Mark, Jake's grades. Dad scanned it, frowned. He furrowed his brow. Well, it's not bad. It's above average. Above average? My mother's voice went up an octave. Emily is always in the top 5. I sank deeper into my chair. There it was again. Emily's name. The plates on the table. They suddenly felt far away, like I was looking at them through a telescope. Sarah, it's not good to compare yourself to others, Dad said, his voice soothing, calm, but it sounded a little tired. Others? Emily lives next door, my mom shot back, her voice rising. Dad looked a little confused. The fork in his hand, it wobbled slightly. Yes, I heard that. That's why Emily is so smart, Mom continued with that determined enthusiasm. David is constantly educating Emily. Jake needs that kind of guidance too. I sat there, silent, and kept eating. Each time my mom spoke, a tight knot formed in my chest. I poked at my food with my fork. My eyes, they stayed fixed on my plate. Jake, Mom said, turning to me. Her eyes, intense. What about studying at the library after school tomorrow? But... I struggled to get the words out. My throat felt tight. No buts, Mom said, firm. It's for your future. Dad cleared his throat, his eyes shifting back and forth between my mom and me. Sarah, Jake needs his own time too. Time? Mom's eyes widened. Right now, he needs to focus on his studies. Mark, what if your education had been? Dad's expression, it clouded over. His hand, it trembled just a bit. What about my education? Oh, nothing, Mom said quickly, changing the subject. There was regret in her voice. I could hear it. Jake, let's plan your schedule for tomorrow. I sighed. Okay. After dinner, I sat in my room staring out the window. Warm light spilled out from Emily's house. I could see a silhouette moving behind the curtain. She was probably studying right now, probably excelling. My room was quiet. The only sound breaking the silence was the tick of the clock on the wall. My textbook, it lay open on my desk. Next to it, a pile of reference books my mom had bought. There was a knock, and my mom entered my room. She looked a little apologetic, a little softer than usual. Jake, I'm sorry, she said, softly. I was a little carried away earlier. It's okay, I responded, still looking out the window. But, Mom said, placing her hand on my shoulder, it was warm. You have amazing potential. It would be a shame not to use it. I just nodded. I didn't have the courage to argue with her. Hey, what about going to Emily's house tomorrow and asking her about how she studies? Mom suggested. Her voice, it held a hint of excited anticipation. What? I asked, turning to her, surprised. Her eyes shining. Yes, Emily would definitely give you good advice. I hesitated. Asking Emily for study tips? Just the thought made my stomach churn. It felt like a terrible idea, but when I saw the hope in my mother's eyes, I couldn't say no. Okay, I agreed reluctantly. My mom smiled, satisfied. That smile, it made me feel uneasy. Good. You can definitely catch up to Emily. After Mom left the room, I collapsed onto my bed. I stared at the ceiling, trying to figure out what tomorrow would be like. Asking Emily for study tips. It was a horrifying thought. A nightmare. The light from Emily's house, it had gone out. She was probably enjoying the end of a fulfilling day. Mine was far from over. My anxieties about tomorrow and my mother's expectations, they were like a suit of heavy armor, weighing me down. What should I do? I whispered. The darkness of my room, it held no answers. I tossed and turned in bed. My old report card, it slipped out from under my pillow. From back when my mom didn't worry so much about my grades. It filled me with nostalgia and a pang of sadness. The stars, shining in the night sky outside my window. Their light felt cold, distant. I closed my eyes. My mother's words and Emily's smile, they mingled in my thoughts. Tomorrow would be a long day. Sarah, do we really need to do this? Jake needs to be free to do what he wants, Dad said, stopping me in the doorway. I turned around and saw my parents. A minor argument. Mom looked determined, her jaw set. Dad, he just looked confused, kind of lost. Mark, it's okay, my mom said, her tone firm. It's for Jake's future. I sighed, deeply. I was getting ready to go to Emily's house, Mom's suggestion. Or maybe it was an order, I wasn't sure. I was supposed to ask Emily for study tips. It felt like going to the gallows. As I walked out the door, the early summer air, it embraced me. The short distance to my neighbor's house, it felt longer than usual. With every step, felt like I was carrying lead weights on my feet. I stopped in front of Emily's house. As I reached for the doorbell, I heard a voice behind me. Jake. I turned around. My mom was standing there. Determination, it was practically radiating from her eyes. I'm coming with you. What? I exclaimed, surprised. But, Mom. It's okay, Mom said, smiling. But I sensed a different emotion beneath that smile. Something else was going on. I'm going to talk to David too. I was speechless. My mom didn't understand how embarrassing it was to go to my neighbor's house asking for help with my studies. It was mortifying. I reluctantly pressed the doorbell. After a few seconds, the door opened. Oh, hey, Jake, Emily said, her voice bright. And, Sarah? My mom smiled gracefully. Hello, Emily. Is your father home? Emily nodded, a little flustered. Yes, he's in his study. Come in. We were led into the living room. David appeared. His calm demeanor, it eased my tension a little. Just a little. Welcome, David said, offering us a warm smile. What can I do for you? My mom stepped forward. Actually, we wanted to talk to you about Jake's grades. David nodded understandingly. I see. What's going on? My mom pulled out my report card. I wondered when she got it. Jake's grades aren't improving. David scanned the report card, thoughtful for a moment. While he was looking at it, I made eye contact with Emily. She looked apologetic, like she was sorry for something. I see, David said. Jake, you seem to be good at math. What? I was surprised. No one had ever said I was good at math before. David smiled. Looking at these grades, it seems like your math foundation is solid. If you can apply that to other subjects, my mom interrupted. But, compared to Emily, let's avoid comparisons, David said, gently but firmly. Every child has their own talent. Is that true? Mom asked. David nodded. Yes. Every child has their own talent. The words, they warmed my heart. Emily smiled back at me. looking happy too. I think she felt relieved for me. So, what can we do? Mom's voice. It still held a touch of anxiety. David answered calmly. I think it would be good to focus on Jake's strengths. Use math as a foundation and find the connections to other subjects. That way, his overall grades will improve. My mom listened, silently. Her expression, it was unreadable. And, David continued, it's important to pay attention to Jake's interests too, not just his studies. Balance is key. I was surprised. It felt like David could see inside my mind, like he knew me. Mom took a deep breath. All right, thank you. On the way home, my mom was silent. Her silence, it weighed heavily on me, like a physical weight. As we reached the front door of our house, Mom suddenly hugged me. I'm sorry, Jake, she said, her voice trembling. I've been thinking about you too much. I was taken aback, confused. But I rubbed my mom's back. It's okay, Mom. She pulled back from the hug, looked me in the eye. I'll try to pay more attention to your feelings. I promise. I nodded. Something melted inside my chest. A tight knot. It was finally loosening. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in a long time. The lights from Emily's house, they shone gently through the window. For some reason, I felt hopeful. My mom's change, David's words, and Emily's presence. Everything was slowly but surely changing something within me. I didn't know what it was yet, but it felt good. I decided to trust that feeling. As I closed my eyes, David's words echoed in my mind. Every child has their own talent. That's right. There must be something special about me, too. My journey to discover it, it had just begun. With that thought, I drifted off to sleep. It was early summer, and the sunshine felt warm and comforting. I was reading in the backyard, trying to relax. The sound of pages turning, the chirping of cicadas in the distance, filled the quiet afternoon, peaceful. That's when I noticed Emily approaching. I looked up. Something in her expression made me close my book. It was like she was hiding something, a secret. What's wrong? I asked. Emily looked around, like she was afraid of being overheard. She whispered, Jake, something's weird with Dad lately. I frowned. What do you mean? Emily took a deep breath. It's like Dad and Sarah have been meeting secretly while we're at school. I was surprised, stood up. My mind went blank. What? Really? Emily nodded. Fear and sadness, they were in her eyes. I'm not completely sure, but Dad's been acting strange, and I've heard Sarah's name a few times. I held my head in my hands. No way. The thought of my mom and David having some kind of relationship that wasn't normal crossed my mind. The feeling, it was like a tight band squeezing my chest. I met Emily's eyes. The same fear and determination I felt, they were mirrored in her gaze. We have to find out, I said. My voice, it was shaking just a little. Emily nodded. Yeah, but how? I thought for a moment. Different ideas were swirling in my head. First, we need to observe their behavior. Then, gather evidence? Emily finished, quickly. That's right, I nodded. We need proof before we can confront them. From that day on, Emily and I started our secret investigation. We took turns watching our parents, taking notes, and even following them sometimes. It was like we were spies in a bad movie. We'd share our findings in a chat app. Late at night, each day, it was a constant source of tension. I had to pretend to be normal in front of my parents while secretly working on this investigation. This double life, it was slowly draining me. A few days later, We met at a park bench to discuss our findings. Dad has gone out twice this week for work. He hasn't had work outside the house in ages, Emily reported. Her voice, it was laced with resignation and anger. I frowned. Mom said the same thing, that she's meeting friends and she leaves around the same time. This is it, isn't it? Emily said. As soon as she said it, the reality hit me. Like a punch to the gut, Emily sighed. But this isn't enough. It's not enough proof. I finished her sentence. As we sat in silence, lost in thought, my phone buzzed. It was an email. I unconsciously opened it. My eyes widened. Emily, look. Emily leaned closer. Gasped. The screen. It displayed passionate messages. From David to my mom. It looked like he'd accidentally sent the email to me too. This is... Emily's voice shook. I clenched my fists. Anger and sadness, they washed over me. This is definite proof. I saw the same fire of anger in Emily's eyes. This is unforgivable, I said in a low voice. I had to clench my teeth just to stop myself from yelling. Emily nodded. What should we do? I took a deep breath. My head, it was racing with ideas. Then, one thought rose to the surface. Let's give them a taste of their own medicine. Emily looked a little startled. But then she stiffened her expression. How? We huddled closer, began whispering. The trees in the park, they swayed in the wind, like they were trying to hide our actions. The plan, it started to take shape. Camping, poisonous mushrooms, confession. Are you sure this is the right thing to do? Emily asked finally. Her voice, it was laced with anxiety. I hesitated for a moment. Was this the right thing? But then I regained my composure. Yes, we need to teach them a lesson for their betrayal. Emily nodded silently. I saw the same mix of determination and anxiety in her eyes. As dusk fell, we parted ways. We were going to put the plan into action tomorrow. I didn't know how this decision would change our lives. The orange-tinged sky, it seemed to reflect our complicated emotions. What would happen next? To be honest, I was terrified. But the truth, it had to come out, even if it meant destroying our families. I stood frozen in front of the tent, middle of the woods. The trees, they seemed to be looking down at me, judging. The sound of leaves rustling in the wind, it seemed to whisper, stop. But I couldn't turn back. Emily walked up to me. Determination, it filled her eyes, just like it filled mine. Ready? She asked, a whisper. I nodded, silent. My throat, it felt dry, couldn't speak. The journey, it played like a movie in my mind. The day Emily confided in me, the day the evidence of my mom and David's affair became undeniable. The moment we made this plan, it all felt like it was leading to this. Jake, Emily, my mom's voice called out, come help us with dinner. Emily and I exchanged glances. A small nod. Our signal. We walked back to the campsite. My mom and David, they were laying out food. Dad was gathering firewood. The scene, it felt almost comical, like a happy family gathering. If you didn't know better, what can we do to help? I said, trying to sound normal. Jake, can you wash the vegetables? My mom replied, smiling. My heart raced. This was it. Yes, Mom. I took the basket of vegetables from her. I slipped the special mushrooms we had prepared into the basket. Poisonous. Not lethal, but enough to cause a powerful effect. Dad hated mushrooms, so he wouldn't eat them. He had taught me about poisonous mushrooms in the woods, and I knew which ones to avoid. Now, I was using his knowledge to punish them. As I washed the vegetables, self-doubt hit me. Was this the right thing? But Mom and David, they betrayed us. They deserve to be punished. But this way? My thoughts, a whirlwind. My hands, they moved mechanically. Emily came closer. Are you okay? Her voice, it trembled slightly. Yeah, I replied, short. I wasn't okay. But I couldn't turn back now. The food preparation, it continued. The vegetables, they were added to the soup pot. Steam rose from the pot. The aroma, it felt like the scent of sin. Come on, it's ready, my mom said, gesturing to the pot. We sat in a circle. The soup, with the mushrooms, it was placed in front of my mom and David. Dad's soup, mushroom-free. All right, let's eat, my mom said. Their voices, it sounded like a prayer. At the Last Supper, my mom and David brought the soup to their mouths. Time, it seemed to stand still. Emily and I, we watched them intently, not touching our own bowls. After a few moments, my mom's expression, it changed. I feel a little. David grimaced. I feel a little. Their faces, pale, cold sweat beading on their foreheads. Dad jumped up, alarmed. Sarah, David, what's wrong? He reached for his cell phone. In that moment, Emily grabbed his hand. Wait, she said, her voice cold. Dad looked at us, confused. What's going on? I took a deep breath. This was the moment. Mom, David. My voice, it was unnaturally calm, steady. Confess your sins. My mom and David's eyes, they widened. Pain, shock. Jake, what? My mother's voice, it trembled. You don't have to say anything, Emily continued. Your relationship. David coughed. What are you talking about? It's over, I said calmly, firmly. We know everything. Your affair. Dad looked at me shocked. Jake, what are you saying? It's true, Dad, I said, turning to face him. Mom and David, they've been seeing each other without us knowing. Emily and I, we have proof. My mom burst into tears. David, he covered his face with his hands. Dad looked at my mom. Disbelief. Sarah, is it true? My mom couldn't answer. She just kept crying. I continued. Both of you, you need to tell us the truth. Or else what? David lifted his head. Fear, it was in his eyes. Emily answered coldly. Or else we'll leave you like this. Dad yelled. Panic. What are you doing? Call an ambulance. Wait. I interrupted him. You both ate the poisonous mushrooms I found in the woods. The ones you taught me to avoid, Dad. You'll be okay. Not a lethal dose. But it will be a long 2 hours of discomfort. If you don't tell us the truth, we won't do anything to help. My mom and David, they looked at each other, pained, surprised. Then, slowly, they nodded. We're sorry. My mom's voice, it was raspy. We made a mistake, David chimed in. We're sorry for betraying everyone. They began to tell the whole story, choked with tears, their affair, the secret meetings, the guilt. Dad listened, silent, anger and sadness mixed in his expression. When they finished, my mom and David, they collapsed, exhausted. We're begging you, please call an ambulance, David pleaded. Emily and I, we exchanged glances. This was it. Our revenge. It was complete. But was this really the end? What would happen to us now? Different emotions, they swirled within me. Anger, the sorrow of betrayal, the satisfaction of revenge, and guilt. We'd used poison to make people suffer. Even if it wasn't lethal, it was still a crime. I looked at Emily. The same internal struggle, I saw it in her eyes. Silence. Only the sounds of the forest. The wind, the birds, a river murmuring in the distance. The sounds of nature, they seemed to accentuate the wrongness of what we'd done. I took a deep breath. Then I made my decision. Okay, I said quietly. That's enough. Emily nodded. Just a little. I turned to face my dad. Dad, call an ambulance. Dad grabbed his cell phone immediately. I went over to my mom and David. They still looked pained, but relief, that was there too. I'm sorry, I said softly. But this isn't the end. We need to talk about what comes next. All of us. Emily added, we were wrong too. But so were you. We need to be honest with each other, from now on. The sound of sirens, it grew louder in the distance. As I heard the sirens, I thought to myself, this isn't the end. It's just the beginning. We have to repair our broken relationships. We have to regain trust. It won't be easy, but we have to do it. The paramedics arrived, started treating my mom and David. Emily and I, as planned, we cried. We told the paramedics. We had picked mushrooms from the forest, put them in the soup, and they started feeling bad. We didn't know they were poisonous. We made it seem like an accident. Dad just watched, silent. The events in that forest, they changed all our lives. But it's not over yet. What will happen to our family? Do you want to know? Maybe, if I get the chance.